Hey, I just saw The Last Airbender yesterday and felt like sharing some thoughts about it. This is going to be an audio review only, so please forgive the lack of visuals that I usually include. I just really wanted to share my thoughts on this and get it out quickly while all the stuff is still fresh in my mind. And just so you know, I'm going to try and not to spoil anything if you haven't seen it yet, okay? Anyway, The Last Airbender. Now, first, let me say that I love the TV show. Avatar The Last Airbender is one of my favorite shows of the last 10 years, and I was actually really excited about the movie. Now, if you don't know about the story, this takes place in an alternate universe. It's kind of like an ancient Chinese setting where some people have the ability to control elements of water, earth, air, and fire. And balance in the world is maintained by the Avatar, who's able to control all four elements. Now, basically, the Fire Nation decides to take over the world, and that means that the new Avatar, Aang, has to master all the elements to defeat the Fire Nation. Now, again, I'm not going to give anything away, but if you're familiar with the show, the story in the movie follows all of Season 1. It starts right where Season 1 starts, and it ends right where Season 1 ends. And, of course, there are going to be sequels for Seasons 2 and 3. Now, I am not going to do any fanboy bitching about how some of the characters look different in the movie than they do in the show, or how some of their names are pronounced differently. Now, for the sake of this review, I am pronouncing the names as they sound in the TV show, but that's only because that's what I'm used to hearing. Although, I will point out, with Aang being the Avatar, about half the people in the movie call him the Avatar, and half call him the Avatar. So you know what? Shame on you, M. Night Shyamalan, for not catching that. I mean, if you're gonna change something, at least be consistent with it. But for all you people whining about stuff like how Uncle Iroh looks different in the movie, guys, sometimes the movie is going to be different from the show. Deal with it. Now, I will make a couple of exceptions here. Now, the first one is with Sokka. Now, in the movie, Sokka is played by Jasper from the Twilight movies. And I was kind of disappointed here, and no, this has nothing to do with Twilight, but the dude looks and sounds just like Sokka from the TV show, but the script makes his character so serious and flat and boring. And I'm not even exaggerating here. If they had just left in his sense of humor from the show, he would have been perfect. The other exception I have to make here is for Nicola Peltz as Katara. Now, in the show, Katara is very determined and strong. In the movie, though, she constantly looks like she's about to cry. Anytime that she actually takes initiative in anything, it comes off more like a surprise, and not in a good way. It's more like, really? Why would this character do that? And beyond that, her performance is just bad. Now, understand that every actor in this movie suffers from a script that's just horribly stilted and boring, but with Katara especially, it just seemed like watching a little kid in a school play. Now, I don't know if it's her own lack of experience, or if it's M. Night Shyamalan's fault for not directing his actors properly, but it just got to the point where, even when other scenes were bombing, I actually ended up thinking to myself, well, at least Katara's not in this scene. And that's not a good thing. I hate saying that, but she really ended up dragging down the whole movie whenever she appeared. But anyway, that's enough of comparing it to the TV show. I know a lot of people are wondering, well, what if I didn't watch the show? Will I still like the movie? And the answer is, no. No, you probably won't. And here's why. To begin with, the story treats you like a moron. Everything has to be explained and talked about, and in some cases more than once. In one scene, Prince Zuko from the Fire Nation disguises himself and calls some kid over to help narrate his own backstory. And then when the kid is done, he just goes, okay, go away now. There's honestly no reason for that kid to even be there. And in a different scene, we learn that one of the bad guys, Commander Zhao, has stolen a scroll from an ancient library. How do we know that it's a scroll from an ancient library? And that he stole it? Because he stops and tells us at least 4 times that he stole the scroll from an ancient library. You know, most of Airbender's fan base is older than 3, so I have no idea who they're writing this for. But aside from the story, this movie is supposed to be a fantasy martial arts epic, and the fantasy and martial arts are both represented so poorly. Now, for one thing, there are the elemental bending abilities, and for some reason, in this movie, it takes so fucking long to bend an element that it hardly seems like it's even worth it. Literally, anytime someone starts bending something, they have to dance around in some ridiculous kung fu kata for 10 seconds before anything happens. And for the most part, Aang can't even blow someone away until they're almost half a centimeter away from him. That's not an effective way to fight, and from an audience standpoint, it's boring because it takes so long for anything to actually happen. And most of the time, it all looks exactly the same, regardless of what they're trying to do. The Bender's movements don't seem to have anything to do with how the elements are being manipulated. But for a perfect example of just how ridiculous this all gets, there's one point in the movie where Aang teams up with a sword fighter called the Blue Spirit. And they're each fighting off the Fire Nation soldiers, and it shows Aang fighting, and it's like... one guy. Another guy. And then it shows the Blue Spirit, and he's like, stab, 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 cut, 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 fight, fight, fight. And then it goes back to Aang, and he's like, one more guy. Just, why am I even watching this? And the point I'm trying to make for all of this is, right at the end of the movie, there's a big climactic battle. And for just a few moments, Aang just starts tearing shit up. He's taking out soldiers left and right, like bam, bam, bam. And he's using his airbending to make himself run faster, and he's just flying down the battlefield. And I just looked up at the screen thinking, what the hell, movie? You waited until right now to finally get good? I mean, seriously, why weren't all the fight scenes like this? I mean, I know it's supposed to be the biggest, most exciting part of the movie, but everything else before that was just so boring. And despite all the story and all the martial arts and all the other stuff going on, it just felt like you were watching people standing around doing nothing. And the reason this pisses me off more than anything else I've seen all year is... Okay, look, it's one thing to watch a bad movie and then speculate about all the different things that they could have done better. Like, oh, if the script had said this, or if the actors had done that. But this scene at the end here actually proves that they could have done better. It demonstrates that they had the ability to pull this off and to do it properly, but they simply chose not to. Why would you do that? I used to respect you, Mr. Shyamalan. The Sixth Sense is still brilliant. Unbreakable is still one of my favorite films. But you've just taken Avatar, The Last Airbender, and turned it into the cinematic equivalent of watching someone read a dictionary. And then for 1 minute at the end you went, oh, wait a minute, is this the movie you wanted to see? What a twist! You know what? Fuck you, and fuck your sequels. Even if you cast yourself as Toph's personal slave in the next movie, I don't care. I am just fucking done with this franchise.